Hi, welcome. Thank you very much for listening into this presentation. So I thought I'd just kind of introduce myself first. So my name's Lucy Gosden. I work at the Treasury. I actually work in their HR team. And my role is that I am the graduate recruitment manager. So I look after all recruitment into the graduate programme that we have. And kind of helping candidates get from making an application all the way through to hopefully a job offer made. So I'm here today to talk to you a little bit around what we do and also talk about the policy advisor role that we have on offer. If you're like many people just watching kind of what's going on in the world at the moment and finding it very interesting, hopefully this will be an opportunity that you might like to consider for the future. So I wanted just to kind of start with the basics for those who maybe don't know about the Treasury. So what is it the Treasury does? So we've predominantly been known for kind of coming out and kind of releasing the budget every year. One of the main fiscal events that we are in charge of. But I think kind of we've probably been in the headlines a little bit more in the past 6 months with everything that's been going on. But essentially kind of what we do is we are, the government's finance and economics ministry. So largely what we do can be lumped into kind of 3 different areas. So this kind of slide just gives it a bit of an illustration as to what we do. So we're about kind of looking at kind of ways that we can raise money for the government. So that's through things like tax. So that could be personal tax, that could be indirect tax, such as, VAT measures. Any way that kind of the government can raise money, that kind of goes through the kind of tax area. So we raise money, but then we also look at kind of how is the government spending that money. So we'll work with kind of local governments, other departments to look at kind of, what does that mean? So whether it be things like civil service pays, pensions, how kind of, it's being kind of devolved down to local governments, and looking at kind of, making sure that it's spent responsibly. But there's also another different element of what we do, which is around kind of the financial services aspects. So actually around kind of things like regulation of banks or predicting kind of, economic forecasts, trying to kind of, stimulate the economy if we're at a downturn. So there's kind of the 3 different cogs of what we do, and they all kind of work together in kind of tandem. I've also put on this slide just to mention that obviously we have kind of international teams which look at kind of advancing our interests in the EU and kind of further afield. Also very prevalent at the moment is also kind of the UK's economic response to COVID-19. You can't have failed to have missed some of the kind of schemes that the Treasury's been kind of spearheading. And things like, the job furlough scheme, the job retention schemes, Eat Out to Help Out to try and kind of save the hospitality sector jobs. All of those schemes have been worked on by members of the Treasury and kind of delivered the policy. And those have been kind of policy advisors on our graduate schemes that have been working on that. So it's really kind of some very interesting work going on at the moment in terms of what we do to try and support the country through this. So really kind of what I'm trying to illustrate here is that we are at the centre of kind of the state, as it were. The Treasury's existed going back to kind of 1066, so it's been around for a very long time, and it is an essential function of the government, and everything that we do is so widespread. It touches absolutely everyone's lives, whether you kind of realise it or not. So there's a huge amount of, decisions that get made around kind of how we're raising and spending money in the Treasury. Also just being accountable to Parliament, because obviously we are a ministerial department. So we have that connection and very close relations to Parliament in that way. And it's also our responsibility to know how much the government spends and make sure that, we are putting the economy on a kind of steady and sustainable footing for the future. So the Treasury is really kind of important and integral to the government's work and what kind of the everyday functional running of kind of government in that sense. I think just to talk a bit more about kind of who we actually are, because I think myself, having joined the Treasury just over a year ago now, I had expectations which, coming into it, it's not been anything like I expected at all. And I think kind of some of the information that I shared, a lot of people are quite surprised by it. So I just thought I'd share a few stats with you. So 18% of our staff are from diverse ethnic backgrounds. This is something that we're actively looking to increase, and we very much kind of value diversity across the board, and it's something that there's some real serious conversations going on at the moment around what more can we be doing. So looking at kind of things like reverse mentoring for senior staff. We've also got some talent schemes that are trying to kind of help people progress in their careers and making sure that there's no kind of, glass ceiling in that kind of sense. And that's something that's really, really important to us in terms of the conversations that we're having at the moment. I put that stat in just around 8% of staff working part-time. I think flexibility is really, really key it's one of the great kind of advantages of working at the Treasury. I mean, in terms of our kind of setup, we have pretty much everyone at the Treasury works flexibly in some way. So we have key working hours of 10 till 4, so it's up to people to decide which way they want to kind of work, whether they want to start early and leave at 4 or start a bit later and end earlier on a daily basis. Very kind of, a huge array of different working schedules. We have people working part-time, compressed hours, taking flexi leave to kind of where people have accrued so many hours. And there's a huge variety of different flexible working patterns available to everyone who joins the Treasury. Gender is very much on our kind of radar as well. So this is a stat that has, it has progressed over the past couple of years, which we're really, really proud of, to the point where actually we now have slightly more women in senior leadership roles at the Treasury than we do men. So that's very much something that we've been looking to make sure that we're kind of turning the dial on gender equality in that way. And then finally, I just wanted to put say that kind of 40% of graduates actually have work experience before they join us. So we do have that population that do join straight from university, but actually we do have a few, quite a large percentage there of people joining who have, a couple of years experience or more than that. So we do have job changes. If anyone's really interested in this and looking for a new kind of path, career avenue, then this is something that, we do take that on. So something to just kind of keep in mind if you're thinking about your options. So what do policy advisors do? And it's very much kind of, you're there to be kind of guide and give advice to whatever government is in power of the day. So it's things like, what do you do on a daily basis? So it's things like stakeholder management. And when we say that, it's just being able to kind of talk to people, lots of different teams. You'll probably come into contact with people internally, different teams, but you'll also be talking to external contacts most likely as well. So it could be local governments, it could be other ministerial departments. It could be that, you're advising ministers on a, set of policy objectives and how you might be able to achieve that, and what is the best way to do that that's going to be beneficial to everyone. You're very much going to be writing submissions. Writing is a very kind of important quality for a policy advisor. Any kind of document that you see on kind of gov.uk would have been probably written by a policy advisor, and that's very much a kind of integral, our kind of bread and butter to the role. So being able to write very clearly is very what a policy advisor does. You have to have a high level of kind of analysis. You have to be able to kind of scrutinise documents and really kind of get down to the kind of the meaning of what is behind it, and being able to kind of talk through that in a very kind of clear and succinct way. Project management, so it's very likely that you'll probably be involved in some kind of project or some kind of delivery by a certain point. So there might be an element that you'll need to kind of oversee that, and making sure that kind of everyone's notified, everyone's kind of consulted that needs to be consulted, and making sure that it's hitting kind of those milestones as it goes along. So project management does come into it as well. And then finally, last but not least, actually having kind of policy ideas, being able to kind of formulate ideas on what kind of a policy could mean to lots of different people, and then kind of making sure that you're kind of putting those ideas into kind of a written format that's going to be helpful to everyone, regardless of backgrounds, everything like that. So these are the types of skills that you'll very much kind of see a policy advisor doing whilst they are kind of in the role. I put a note in there just to say, give you an idea of the size of our department. So we have about 1,500 people in the. It does fluctuate kind of daily, probably, as people kind of move around from jobs, but roughly it's around that. So actually we are one of the smaller departments that the government has. But that being said, we have a huge amount of responsibility. So I put in there just that number, 928 billion, is actually the number that the amount of money that we are responsible for, and that was in this year. And what that tells you is, as a policy advisor, you have a huge amount of responsibility on your shoulders, because that is kind of taxpayers' money, and to make sure that that is spent responsibly is a big ask, and you are asked to do that pretty much from day one, obviously with the support of a team around you, but you really do have some serious kind of responsibility right from the start. So moving on to what is it really like? So I think when you kind of hear 1,500, it sounds like it's a huge place. I'm going to get lost. Actually, it's not like that at all. The way that it's set up, you'll actually feel like you're working in very small teams, and very small teams are responsible. And it might be that you're kind of the sole lead for a kind of a policy area sitting within a branch. So you work in very, very small teams. And in terms of kind of the flat hierarchies, what we mean by that is kind of, we very much will find that, we don't kind of deliver a service, as it were. So HMRC, you have a huge variety of different people working and delivering kind of, a huge amount of kind of tax advice, say, and you are dealing kind of one-to-one with kind of people on a day-to-day basis. So there's a huge hierarchy there, for instance. In the Treasury, we don't have that kind of element. So actually, as you coming in as what we would call you a range D level, you are talking and dealing with very kind of higher people throughout the kind of Treasury, and they're people very, very senior. So they could be 3-4 rungs up the kind of promotional ladder from you, but you're very much kind of talking to them on a daily basis, and they're wanting to hear what you're saying and what you're thinking on kind of issues. So it's very, very flat. There's none of that kind of hierarchy that kind of goes on with us. It's fast-paced and lots of change. I think that kind of goes to show, with everything that's been going on in the past kind of 6 months with coronavirus. We have teams that kind of pretty much had to pop up overnight and be created. And when that kind of came in, and the news kind of lockdown was there overnight, people were kind of reallocated to work on kind of this really kind of business essential work. And that's not uncommon. We've had that. We do have that quite a lot. So you have to be able to be resilient. You have to be able to deal with a lot of kind of change to happening, and sometimes working in parameters which you don't know all the information, or you have to kind of take a very educated guess from the information that you have. And also you deal with some very, very senior ministers and very senior civil servants. I heard of someone who joined in our September intake last month, who a month in is already kind of sitting in on briefings with Rishi Sunak, our Chancellor of the Exchequer already. So you do get some very kind of, broad exposure to a lot of senior people, and that's not uncommon at all. So these are kind of just to give you a feel for kind of what it's like to work at the Treasury. So what are we looking for? So these are kind of the skills that we are assessing throughout our recruitment process, in particular for kind of the graduate role as a policy advisor. So these kind of skills are things to kind of have in your mind when you're thinking about whether I'm going to kind of fit into this kind of role and whether this is good for me. So if you feel like you have these skill sets, it's definitely worth a thought. So You have to be able to kind of have a good analytical mind. You have to be able to kind of see things clearly. You have to be able to communicate things both verbally and written very, very clearly as well, because that's a crucial part, as I'd say, around kind of what we do. You have to be able to kind of work with people at all different levels, whether that's senior or more junior, or completely on the same kind of range as you, and be able to kind of work with others very easily. And you would have explored that during your kind of time, whether that's through work or studies or outside kind of in hobbies and things like that. You have to be able to be self-motivated as well, and resilient. And I think that kind of goes with the kind of fast pace and things changing very, very quickly. You have to be able to kind of sit there and kind of really motivate yourself to kind of go on and, really make sure that you're kind of delivering the best policy and the best advice that you can, depending on what it is that you're working on at the moment. So just to talk a little bit more about the actual programme. So we offer a 3-year graduate programme, we call it, the Graduate Development Programme, and it comprises of 2 18-month placements. So what we do is that, we will place you in a team once you join, and then you spend 18 months there, and then there's a rotational process. So you'll go into a different team after that, working on maybe something slightly different. So we work with you to try and kind of find out what your kind of development needs are, and to try and kind of place you in a kind of complementary one to where you want to kind of go forward from there. But the idea is that you get a broad exposure to different policy areas to hopefully make you a better policy advisor after the kind of programme. I do want to kind of stress that it is a permanent job. I think when I say 3-year programme, people think it's maybe a fixed term contract. It's not at all. If you're offered a place on the graduate development programme, it is a permanent role that you will be getting. So at the end of 3 years, we tend that there's people do different things. So some will then kind of progress and they'll want to go up in their career, maybe start thinking about kind of applying to roles that are kind of more senior, but others decide not to, and that's absolutely fine with us. They might decide to stay in role that they're in at the moment, or they might apply to kind of develop their skills elsewhere that they haven't worked before and go on to do another role. So it is a permanent job, and the starting salary is $28,500. They are all based in Westminster in London. But that being said, we have people at the moment that aren't based in London. For instance, I'm based in Lincolnshire, and as part of the kind of flexible working policy before COVID-19, I managed to kind of agree that I worked from home 2 days a week. And there's a lot of kind of flexibility there. So do have a kind of think about kind of whether that would have been of interest, because I'm sure those kind of conversations can be had. At the moment, we are open for applications, but we do have kind of 2 start dates. So we have the April and September start dates most years. We've had it for the past 5 years anyway. So it's pretty much every year that we do this. You can express preferences for particular areas of work, so we do take that into consideration when we're allocating, but we do have to balance it with business need and what is available at the time that we're allocating. And then the final kind of point there is just to say that it's a great entry route. So if you don't have any background, that's absolutely fine. You can come in and you can train up, and we'll give you all the knowledge that you need. All we need to know is that you have those kind of essential skills that I've talked about previously, and you demonstrate that through the recruitment process. If you do want to find out anything more, please do go to our careers website, because there's a lot more kind of information around what the programme is, what it kind of looks like, and it talks a bit more in detail around that. The eligibility requirements, so it's open to absolutely anyone with any degree background. All we ask is that you have a 2.2 or above in your undergraduate degree. We do have people that come to us with masters or kind of further study, kind of post-university qualifications, whatever it may be. That's absolutely fine. Everyone kind of joins on the same programme for us. So it's, as I say, it's a really great entry route. As long as you have those minimum criteria, we can train you up to do that, or if you're on track for, hopefully. So also just to mention that there are some, because of civil service nationality rules, there are some kind of criteria that we need you to meet in order to meet the security clearance for this. So just if you have any questions around that, there's further information on our website that explains it in a bit more detail, but that is something that you will need to consider as well. And just to talk about kind of our process and our timeline. So for 2021, we are recruiting at the moment. So we are looking to ask you to complete an application form, to start off with, which just asks for your basic personal information and some kind of educational history. And then as part of that, you will be asked to answer questions which form part of our situational judgment test. So that's kind of the one where they ask you a scenario and then you're asked kind of what's your most likely and your least likely response going to be in that scenario if you were in it. It's not timed whatsoever, so you can do it in your own time. So please do make sure that you do that before the deadline if you would like to make an application, which is at 12 noon on the 6th of November. The next stage, if selected, is then the verbal reasoning test. So this is probably familiar with kind of territory if you've taken any psychometric testing. So it's there to kind of really try and understand your ability for kind of understanding written text and see whether you have those analytical skills. So it is a timed scenario, and that will kind of, there'll be further information as and when you get there on that, on how to prepare. The next stage is what we're calling the timed written questions. So you'll have 2 questions which you'll be asked to answer within a certain time frame. So one of the questions is around kind of your previous experiences working in teams. And then the second is a job scenario based kind of question. So you'll be asked to have a look at some information and then compile what you think is relevant and really kind of basically analyze that information into kind of, a very clear and succinct format. Then the final stage is the virtual assessment centre. So this year they're taking place in January and February. They usually take place either a morning or an afternoon, and you can kind of have that selection of when you have it. As part of that, there are 3 exercises. So there's a panel interview, there's a policy conversation, and there's a written exercise. So the interview is probably self-explanatory. It's a mixture of behavioural questions and strengths-based questions, all on the civil service success profile. So if you put that into Google, it all comes up around kind of what we look at, and you will be told prior what the behaviours are that we'll be assessing, so you can prepare. The policy conversation, you're given a topic beforehand, and then you are asked to kind of go away, read a few articles, do a bit of research, and then on the day you'll be given 2 questions based on that kind of topic area. And then you'll have 30 minutes to prepare, and then you'll have a conversation with some of our assessors around your thoughts on it. So hopefully that's very truthful in terms of what you're going to be doing, and then just gives you a flavour of kind of the type of work a policy advisor does. And then the final stage is, final exercise, is the written exercise, where you'll be given a booklet of information to read through, and then it's up to you to kind of condense that into kind of what are the options and giving a recommendation. So again, it's all about kind of analytical skills. Can you take the information and put it in a really clear and succinct way that's going to make sense to anyone who doesn't have a background in it? So no outside knowledge needed for that, but it's all about kind of, can you understand this information and put it in under time pressure in a very clear and succinct way. All our recruitment process this year is completely virtual and all online, so there's no need to kind of travel into London or anything like that. So please do keep that in mind if that's something that's important to you. So that was everything that I wanted to talk to you about. Hopefully that's kind of whetted your appetite into kind of finding out more. If you do want to find out more, please do go to our website. There's a few more kind of live events and kind of virtual live events, I should say, going on over the next couple of weeks if you'd like to talk to any more people. But thank you very much for your time. I hope that, I wish you all the very best for your studies.